Senator Bradley, Senator Bradley come before you and make a few remarks, which are in coming up right away. Right away, Rob. Thank you.
Let's give another hand to Mary Helen and Kat. Great job. And also to all the candidates and their supporters who are engaging in the process. I tell you, it's such a sacrifice for the candidates and their families to really put themselves out there, to subject themselves to the slings and arrows, and to all of the members of the League of Cities and the elected officials with them, to all the candidates here that we're going to hear from this evening. Congratulations on really stepping out and participating in the process. My name's Rob Bradley. I'm proud to represent all of you as your senator that I represent not only Alachua County, but Bradford County and Clay County. And I wanted to share just a quick, I like a news you can use. One of the candidates up there said, you know, this isn't Democrat, this isn't Republican, this is about being American. Well, let me tell you about something that hopefully you can use as a Floridian. If you're a grandparent, a parent, a potential student. Does everybody know about the Florida Prepaid College Fund, where you can pay not just for yourself, but your child or your grandchild, pay and lock in the rate of tuition so that as tuition goes up, you don't have to suffer from that rise in tuition. You can do it now for your grandkid. You can do it now for your kid. We did something this past session to help every Florida family, and that is we reduced in half. It now costs 50% what it used to cost to lock in tuition for a young scholar in your family going forward. Literally half of what it used to cost. And if you have prepaid tuition, a prepaid tuition plan right now, you're going to get a refund in the mail. All right? And so what I encourage everyone to do is, because is there anything more important than education? I mean, that is all the indicators of success show that the higher you go in your education experience, the more you're going to be able to support your family. We talk a lot about jobs, but the best thing you can do to get a good job and to make a good living is to have a good education. So I encourage everyone to get online and take advantage of this Florida prepaid program. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to represent you in the state Senate. I'm not on the ballot. I'm going to be on the ballot in 2 years. I'm in the middle of a 4-year term, but congratulations to all the candidates. Thank you.
If we may have our next candidates, please. Per section, so we have 3 people, so this will be probably fewer questions, so you have one more person here. Would you please introduce yourselves, and may we go from left to right on the audience, please? John, you want to? Yeah, you want to? Our left, I suppose. Yes, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is John Human, and I'm running for the Florida House of Representatives in District 21. I'm a third-generation Floridian. I was raised just down the road in Gainesville, Florida. I am a proud product of the public school system from Littlewood to Gainesville High School to the University of Florida. And my 3 children attend the same public schools, and I'm very, very proud of our public school system in Alachua County, and I want to build our public school system. When I wasn't in school, I spent my time in the rivers, springs, lakes of north central Florida. And I got to tell you, that's a part of my childhood and a very, very important reason as to why I ran this race, because I want to protect our natural resources. I am an attorney, and I've spent the majority of my career, the last 26 years, representing regular people fighting big corporations, big insurance companies, and big special interests, and I want to take that fight now to Tallahassee. I need to tell you, my platform is very, very strongly in favor of home rule. I believe we need to support broad interpretation of home rule. I oppose unfunded mandates and will fight against unfunded mandates out of the state legislature. I believe that we should drive our economic development by protecting and investing in our environment, and I can go into that a little bit later, by funding our public schools so that they're on a level playing field with our private corporations, and by accepting Medicaid expansion money, creating 70,000 jobs a year, ensuring over 1 million people, and the result will be to build clinics in each of the cities, of the Florida cities, and hospitals, and all kinds of infrastructure, and I'm in support of that. I think it's going to help the cities. By investing in our public schools, our public education, our public health, and our natural resources, we're going to build a stronger Florida together.
All right, thank you. Next is Wendy Martin.
I'm Wendy Martin. I'm a write-in candidate for House Seat District 10. I'm challenging Elizabeth Porter. I'm a graduate of the University of Florida Levin College of Law and the College of Liberal Arts. My undergraduate major was criminology and deviance. I'm an ordained minister. I did not pass my bar exams. I have taught for St. Leo University criminal justice ethics and criminal justice procedure. I'm running because I'm tired of our government that is currently in office making rules and not following the rules that they're supposed to go by when they're enforcing it. When they passed Charlotte's Web legislation, they violated the Article 3 of the United States, or the Florida Constitution, Article 1 of the Florida Constitution. There are 6 amendments to the U.S. Constitution that current marijuana laws violate. I think the Federal Overregulation Protection Act is going to mess up Florida because of preemption. We risk our natural resources. I think we need to expand health for mental health care. There aren't enough facilities, there isn't enough funding, and I think some of the funding could come from Department of Corrections because of the corresponding drop in time of prison rates are going down, incarceration rates are down, and money for mental health can come out of money that is currently being used within our corrections department. We need better funding of education. I think the corporate tax credit that we give should be paid directly to the Department of Education and spread among both public and private schools instead of just letting all the private schools. And I think the standards for both public and private in regards to testing and funding should be equal across the board based upon student enrollment and the needs of the particular county that they're in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Perry, please.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me out here. My name is Keith Perry, and currently the representative in District 21. Served that for 2 years, finishing my second term. My first term was 22 before the redistricting process took place. Grew up in Gainesville, born in Tallahassee. My dad was in school there. We moved to Gainesville. He was a professor at the University of Florida for 38 years. I was one of those kids who liked looking out the window. And so after high school, I struggled with that. I had a brother and sister who graduated from Florida and then another sister from North Carolina. I was that kid in the family, you know, the first kid who went to college. I was the first kid in the family not to go to college. But I was just a little anxious, so I wanted to take some time off. I started a roofing company, and that's what I've done for 38 years, Perry Roofing Company in Gainesville. We had about 220 employees before the housing and banking collapse, dropped down to 70 employees. For me to see that many people that I knew their families, see the struggles, because when we let them go, there's no other jobs for these guys and their families to go with. So when I looked at running for office, one of the things I looked at was, could I go to Tallahassee and could I take some of the skills that I've learned in business that would help revitalize and help get businesses going again? The other thing that was one of the most compelling things for me at the time, I had a 9 and a 12-year-old daughter. And I thought about their future, and I thought about what kind of a future are they going to have. I look at young people out here today, and I think about what kind of opportunities are they going to have. And as we see the world, the business world today, when I grew up in Gainesville, most of the businesses were mom and pop businesses, about 90%. Today, about 90% of the businesses are corporate owned or franchised. So what that means is that the college graduates of tomorrow are going to get a job, but are they going to be able to use the skills and the talents that they have? Are they going to be pigeonholed into working for a corporation that defines their role in a very narrow focus? And if that's the future, and that's where we're going, unless some major changes are on how we regulate and structure businesses and how we regulate the industry, that's the future that our next generation has. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our first question is a text-in question. John, we might start with you. What position do you hold on the expansion of prison privatization in Florida, and why?
I am adamantly opposed to prison privatization. I think it's bad for North Florida. It's terrible for Gilchrist County. It's terrible for Dixie County. And it's terrible for the Eighth Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. I think government has got some obligations and it's got some primary functions. Corrections, law enforcement, public safety, and education are all traditional government functions. That means that we're providing these functions not so that the businesses that run them can make a profit. We're providing these functions to keep our communities safe. If we privatize prisons, it's been shown time and time and time again, the prison privatization corporations will come in and they will try to maximize their profits. And they'll do that by loading up the cells. They'll do that by using less certified, less qualified prison guards or pseudo prison guards. There will be more escapes. There will be more risk of danger to the community, and it will be an unfunded mandate to all the cities and counties surrounding our prison system. There's nothing wrong with our state correctional system. We need to keep funding it and keep it going. They've kept us safe, and we need to make sure that it stays in business. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come over to Representative Perry, then back to Wendy Martin. So, Representative Perry, please.
Thank you. When I first went to Tallahassee, one of the issues that was close to my heart and a passion was the criminal justice system. I asked to serve on that, and one of the reasons is about 17 years ago, I was the founding president of a program called House of Hope, Christian-based transitional housing where men who are released from prison would have a place to stay. We have recently expanded that into a women's program, so we have a women's house as well. So I did look at the criminal justice system and thought about there's got to be some better things that we do in the criminal justice system. We do a very good job of incarcerating. We do a very poor job of rehabilitating the prisoners. The recidivism rate in the prison system now, not only is it very high at about 50%, but also you got to think about when people commit crimes and get locked back up, what they do is you are victims. Most of the time, multiple crimes are committed before these perpetrators get locked back up. And so we have a moral dilemma of whether or not is it moral if we can do anything we can to keep people out of prison. What can we possibly do to keep these men and these women out of prison and from going back into prison? So from a privatization standpoint, I looked at that model. My first year up there, I was in favor of that. After finding more information and looking at that and really exploring some of the fundamental flaws in privatization, I've now backed off from that issue, and I'm not in favor of that. But I am in favor of looking at everything we can do it's a moral, it's a fiscal issue where we got to look at not only protecting us, it's a core responsibility of government to protect its citizens. By reducing the recidivism rate, we do a job in protecting our citizens. We also do a good job of lowering the cost, and we also do a moral justice for the people that are serving in prison. So we got a lot to do. The prison system, we have some great employees, but there's some fundamental flaws in how the prison system is run and how the reincarceration rate is so incredibly high for these men and women. So there's a lot of work still to do.
Thank you very much. Wendy Martin, please.
I'm against privatization of the prisons. The studies have shown that some of the private prisons like Wackenhut and Corrections Corporation of America have a worse safety record than the state do. They have higher incidences of abuse by the guards towards the inmates. There's more violence among the inmates. The state government level does not have any accountability or oversight of it because it is privatized. I think I've heard of the Hope House, and I've heard it has had some very good results, which shows the need within corrections is we need both the community to be involved as well as the state to be involved. Part of the problem we run into on recidivism rates is that when we release the inmates, we don't give them the resources that they need to be able to get education. To find a new neighborhood to live in is the biggest problem because they usually end up back with the same group that they were hanging with before that got them into trouble to start with. Overall, it's cheaper to have the state operate it than to have the private corporations. And I'm totally opposed to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Probably come back now for, have you been first yet? No. make you first this time. Obviously, there is an amendment on the ballot this time for the legalization of medical marijuana. Do you have any comments on the ballot language or the initiative?
So the question about the amendment, the medical
On
marijuana?
medical marijuana, right.
Well, one of the reasons I got involved in the prison ministry program, I grew up in Gainesville. I went to Buell's High School. I was there in the 70s. I started smoking marijuana when I was in 10th grade. That was a downhill spiral for me, and firsthand understand what the effects have on you. And people can say it's a gateway drug or not. In my life, it was a gateway drug. For almost every single friend that I had in high school, it was a gateway drug. Did not lead to good things. And I want to tell you the quality of the drug that they're talking about now is much different. It's much more powerful, much more potent than anything that we could have bought back when I was in high school. We did pass Charlotte's Web. I understand the concern. We did pass Charlotte's Web, which was a medical marijuana use that passed in the Florida House this last session. And it works. I was in favor of that. It's a product, it's a non-euphoric that does change kids' lives. These kids who were having 60, 70 seizures a day, parents would come in and say they were given a plethora of drugs to try with terrible side effects that they would have. But this form, the Charlotte's Web form of medical marijuana, worked. A kid who's 60, 70 episodes a day, the doctor told him, said, your kid's not going to be able to survive. 3 years old, never been out of the hospital. They used Charlotte's Web, and it worked. And the parents were up there in Tallahassee with their young daughter who was actually walking now. So there's uses for it, but in the form that we have it there, besides that, if you think about really, it's a constitutional thing. The Constitution is not where you have statutory issues like this. The Constitution is not designed. The Constitution is designed to give you a foundation for every other law. So if it does eventually change and move, it should be done through a legislative process, not through a constitutional amendment.
Thank you very much, sir. Wendy Martin, thank you.
Yes, I'm an advocate for the legalization of marijuana, so I don't have too many problems about the medical marijuana. In regards to Charlotte's Web, the legislation did grant a monopoly in violation of Florida's Sunrise Act. Charlotte's Web only treats a limited number of ailments. Leafy and bud type marijuana that you make tea out of, or you can make some of the edibles and follow the instructions carefully, treats more ailments. It can help chemotherapy patients. It can help AIDS patients. It can help persons with chronic illness. It can help with attention deficit because you can learn to, it gives you focus. I don't see marijuana as a gateway drug. Most of the addicts that I have encountered started on other drugs, and marijuana was what they were using to get off the heroin, get off the pain pills, because they had more control over it, less chance of overdose. Any of the events I've been hearing about recently on people dying from overdoses of marijuana have been a result of them taking one of these brownies that's supposed to be a 6-dose and eating it in one batch and not reading the labels and not being properly labeled. You don't have to smoke it, so you don't have to have the health risk related to it. But I don't think Charlotte's Web goes far enough. It granted a monopoly. There are more people. I appreciate what's being done for the epileptics and those that can use the cannabis oil. But there's much more uses than just oil. And I think it should be legalized because there's manufacturing that can be done. There's textiles, biofuels, recyclable plastic, as well as the consumer issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Uman?
You know, our Republican brothers and sisters always want to tell us that they want less government and less intrusion into our lives. And yet, our Republican brothers and sisters are the first people to want to get between our doctors and their patients. I say I'm not the person to tell a doctor what's best for his patient. The doctor knows what's best for his patient. I support the medical marijuana bill amendment, and I support Amendment 2. I will also tell you that, if we're talking about less government, medical marijuana not only creates less government as far as enforcement, but it will generate huge amounts of revenues for our cities and our counties, resolving a lot of the problems that we're having right now. Now, as far as it being a gateway drug, that is absolute nonsense. The people that want you to believe that medical marijuana is a gateway drug are big pharmaceutical companies and big liquor. And if you look to see who contributes to the representatives that oppose medical marijuana, it's ABC Liquors and big pharmaceuticals. So is this about doing the right thing, or is this about getting money to big business that supports candidates? I think it's about big money and big business. The alternative to medical marijuana for end-of-life cancer patients and to middle-aged cancer patients is OxyContin. And OxyContin kills 30,000 Floridians every single year. Marijuana has been shown to kill 0 Floridians every single year. So I think this is all nonsense. It's all intended to keep big business big and to increase profits for big pharmaceutical companies and big liquor. And I'm opposed to that. I want to fight for the regular guy who needs marijuana to fight cancer and to stimulate hunger and to survive the day when they're waiting for the end of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take a generic question, which we asked the previous candidates as well. Wendy, haven't started with you. If you don't mind, I'll start with you. What is something that you disagree with your party about?
I'm a write-in candidate, so none of the parties are supporting me. I
asked the question nevertheless.
For purposes of a voter registration, I am a registered Democrat. I register as a Democrat because independents and other non-party affiliated voters do not get to have any kind of say-so in winnowing down the political candidates during a primary. If independent voters and other third party were allowed to vote, I would probably be registered as an independent or an NPA. But mostly I think with the Republican and the Democratic Party right now, they're too concerned about their own self-survival and their own self-interest, and they have forgotten that they're supposed to be serving the people of the United States of America, and then for purposes of this meet, the people of the state of Florida.
Thank you very much. John Newman, I'll bounce back to you on that one, if you would, please, sir.
Yeah, I agree completely. I am a registered Democrat. I've been a Democrat ever since I was able to vote, and that's about where it ends. I mean, I believe in democratic principles. I believe in the things we've spoken about. I believe in helping cities and helping regular people, and I think by and large the Democratic Party believes that, but so does the Libertarian Party, and so do a lot of Republicans. I am not, the wonderful thing about my candidacy is I am not beholden to any corporations. I'm not beholden to any big businesses. Nobody's paying me off. You can have a look at my campaign contributions. They're coming from real people. And I'm not beholden to the state party. The Florida Democratic Party has done absolutely nothing to persuade me to do one thing or the other. And I agree completely with you. I'm here to do the right thing for regular, hardworking men and women in this district. So along those lines, I'm not going to march to their drum, and they're not going to tell me what to do. I can guarantee you that. Nobody ever has, and nobody ever will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Keith?
You know, the comment on Republicans always want less government unless they want something to do. That's not unique to Republicans. That's whoever's in power is going to make rules and laws that they think are right for the citizens. So I would hope the debate stays on what the question is, what the issue is, not always thrown out when I or anybody else wants to make some kind of rule or law that now we somehow want to control everybody. I think it's the exact opposite. And one of the reasons that I voted against my party on several occasions is just that, is almost every single subsidy. If you think about subsidies, and these are not Republican or Democrat issues, these are government issues. And I talked earlier about what is the individual going to do in this country? What opportunities is the individual able to do? If you look at Google, you look at Facebook, you look at those kind of companies, you know what they have in common? Besides being cutting edge, some of the neatest technologies in the world, they are all in the last unregulated industry in the United States. And when the federal government starts taxing or the state government starts taxing the internet, you will leave those will not be cutting edge. You're going to have large corporations. I voted against every single public-private partnership bill because public-private partnerships, we have one here in town called the biomass plant. I voted against those not based on merit of whether the product was, but because it's a politician picking a person to go in partnership with at the expense of everybody else. So if you're a college kid, a subsidy means that one of you and me, or whoever gets elected, we're going to work together to make sure you have an opportunity, but the rest of the college kids, we're not worried about them. I voted against every one of those, all of those bills I voted against. The other biggest issue that I voted against was tax incentives for the largest sports organizations in the state of Florida. Billionaires that own the Miami Dolphins take tax dollars, and instead of remitting it, they remit it to the state of Florida. The state of Florida writes a check and sends it back to them. And that's you can look at the voting record. You're going to see Democrats and Republicans vote for that. You're going to see a Republican who voted against that and voted against the party on that.
Thank you very much. Practically everyone, and I'll begin, John, if you might, with you on this, practically everyone agrees that in Florida, water is an important issue and the environment's an important issue. Are you in favor of the dock stamp tax being used for environmental issues?
I'm absolutely in favor of Amendment 1, which takes, for those of you that don't know, 3% of dock stamps, the proceeds from dock stamps. It's not a new tax. It just diverts that money to purchase conservation lands and protect our springs and our natural resources. I personally believe that we're sitting on the 8th natural wonder of the world, which is our springs. I grew up in those springs. I've spent my life in those springs. People come from around the world to our springs in Gilchrist County, mostly, and in Dixie County, and in Alachua County. It's a small part of it. And I think that we can grow build economic development if we protect those springs. You know, Orlando and Central Florida's got tourism. We've got ecotourism. And if we invest our money into protecting those springs, they'll be around forever for people from around the world to come and spend their money. We can then build, and I would like to help cities and municipalities around here get state funding to build hotels and service shops and restaurants, all to service the people that would come here for ecotourism. And that way we can protect our environment. We can protect our natural resources forever. And we can also create jobs and protect our economy without polluting, and sending money to the very wealthiest corporations that don't care a thing about Florida. They only care about profits. Thanks.
Your economic need, because the Supreme Court has ruled that if there's a great economic need, the needs of the people or the wants of the people can be put to the side if it's to the betterment of society. I'm not sure what portion of the dock stamp they would be talking about for using towards water, but water purity is becoming an issue, both like you say with the springs and for purposes of drinking water. I'm opposed to shipping water down south, but I figure with the new Blue Springs water facility they put in Madison, Florida, it's a way to send the money down south without actually putting up a pipeline. We are now bottling it. I'm concerned because I've heard mentions of fracking coming up, and that's going to mess up the water also. And I don't want any of the dock stamp money. You know, we would end up having to use dock stamp money to challenge rules on fracking when they come in here. Water purity is definitely an issue, and whatever we can do to help keep the water clean and possibly promote ecotourism, I'm in favor of it.
Thank you very much. Representative Perry.
Well, I think most of us will agree that this area is unique. We have more #1 magnitude springs in this area than any place in the United States and maybe even in the world. And so we got to look at protection that. I just got to tell you again, though, how government works and how Tallahassee works. First off, spending money doesn't mean you get a result. I asked the Department of Environmental Protection at a committee hearing one time. They were making a presentation. I wasn't on that committee, but I wanted to hear what they had to say. And I asked the question, I said, what is the ultimate plan for the state of Florida in purchasing land that we need to protect the environment in whatever capacity, whether it's habitat for animals, whether it's watershed protection? Do you know what the answer was? We don't have a plan. Do you know when the state buys conservation land, do you know how they pick out how they're going to buy it now? Because they don't have a plan? Lobbyists lobby for people who have land that they want to sell the state. It's like the claims bills. If you ever hear of claims bills, that the state has sovereign immunity. So a claims bill is when a person gets to the up to the House and we vote to give them whether they were run over by a city bus and they want to get $1 million and they don't get that. It's the lobbyists that pick the winners. It's not a fair process. And one of the things that you all ought to be concerned with is how much money are we going to spend on consultants and having rewarding lobbyists who get paid a lot of money to sell a product for another person. We got to have a plan. We just cannot trust lobbyists and staff members to go up there and say, well, just trust us. We'll spend your money wisely. And they don't do it because they don't have a plan. And that's what you need to be asking the questions. Not how much money are we going to spend on environmental protection, not how much money we're going to spend on education, how are we going to spend it, and what are the results we're going to get. Right now, they don't have. You cannot quantify the results. And so I'd encourage you to think differently than spending money versus getting results. Copper Cabot Lodge, if you're familiar, the Copper's plant on 23rd Street was 35, 40 years of lawyers and consultants getting paid money without any action. They finally do something, and it's not even what we needed over there.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more round of questions, and let's see if we can select a good one. We have many questions coming in. Thank you very much for participating from the audience and texting us messages. Clearly, since we're in this area, some of the things that are on people's minds are, what do you see as key legislation in Tallahassee that your leadership would be able to provide to enhance the quality of life in this area? When do you want to start with that?
To enhance quality of life? A lot less regulation and government interference within our lives would be a good start. Every time we come up with a new idea for a program that we want, we have to add, again, more regulation for it. I'm really not sure.
Thank you. John, would you have a piece of legislation that you've been thinking about that you would like to, particularly work on that would affect, admittedly, quality of life can be interpreted rather?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would repeal the vouchers program. Because that is $350 million we can send back into our public school system. And when we invest in our children, again, we talked about public, I need to get the mic closer. I'm used to speaking without a mic. I would repeal vouchers, number one. I would fund the resources that we need to protect our natural resources. And Representative Perry seems to think the answer is not to spend money at all. But the experts, and there are experts in environmental reform, say if we can get $500 million a year to protect and restore our springs, we can bring them back up to where they were in the 80s, and we keep that going, we can get them back into the 90s, and keep that going. But we need to spend the money, and we need the experts, and I don't think it's about lobbyists. The lobbyists are the ones going to Tallahassee and saying, don't pass any legislation to protect the springs because we want to keep dumping pollution, 30, 40 dump trucks worth of pollution into our headwaters every single day, because that's how they make profits. I would go to Tallahassee and support a broadened interpretation of home rule. I think cities need the power to regulate themselves, and we need to bring local control back to the cities. I'm opposed to unfunded mandates. I would fight for long-term state funding to clean up and restore the springs, protect the springs and parks, and begin to build back our stormwater and wastewater plants, treatment plants, because they're another disaster in the making. I would allow local authority to adopt environmental ordinances, stormwater and wastewater user fees, septic tank inspection programs, urban fertilizer regulations to control nitrates, meter the water that everybody uses so that we can control on a local level how much water we're using, and fees and fines for the biggest polluters. I think only by giving the power back to the municipalities and the counties are we able to take the power back for ourselves.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Perry, that was our last question coming up, so you're the last person to answer.
Well, certainly regulation is the biggest key. When is government's responsibility to regulate, and how do they regulate? When you have healthcare agencies that get inspected by 4 different agencies with the state and federal inspecting the exact same thing, those are issues that we can look at where we don't compromise anybody's consumer protections and what they get, but at the same time, does it make sense what the state is doing and what the government is doing? and I'll talk quickly about cost of living. I did want to talk about voucher system since that was brought up, and spending $350 million. There are about 70,000 kids in the voucher system right now. Those 70,000 kids are at the lowest income. When I meet a 17-year-old kid in Tallahassee that grew up in Liberty City on a voucher system, he went to Tallahassee with his mother. When he talks about escaping the environment that he was in, he's getting a full ride to Clemson University. And if you talk to him about his neighborhood, if you talk to him about the kids he grew up with and what he had and the chances of the success he had, then you got to say, well, maybe there's some merit to this. Is there anything we need to work on? Absolutely. But if you think about 70,000 kids at $350 million, that money is not coming out of the public education system. It's not affected that. We can talk about dollar amounts and public education funding, but that is actually saving $350 million. Because the cost to educate those in a public school would be twice that, would be about $700 million. And so you can look at it however you want to. You can agree with the vouchers or not agree with them. The fact is it's not coming out of the public education system, and you got real kids who you meet, and they tell you their story, and they come from the lowest of lowest income, and you see the success, and you say there's got to be something we got to do. We cannot protect institutions. In that particular thing in education, we got to look at kids and how we can change that. I don't know how much time I got, probably not much. The biggest thing we got to look at
One
is...
second.
1 second.
I would say that's over. I want to thank everyone participating at the State House conversations. And now we will change our venue.